coming on the air with one more Republican hoping to dethrone Donald Trump as the head of the GOP kingdom, with Ron DeSantis officially making it official in about 60 minutes, set to say he's all in for 2024. And he's doing it in a way we've never seen before. Audio only on Twitter in a conversation with Elon Musk. How DeSantis hopes to make America more Florida, whether he's really who Republicans want right now, and what sources and voters are telling our team tonight. Plus, we'll take you live to Uvalde, Texas, 1 year since that horrific attack ended in the murders of 19 fourth graders and 2 teachers. Why families are still demanding accountability as their hearts break all over again. And new tonight, more charges for convicted murderer Alec Murdaugh, how they fit into the broader web of allegations against him. Plus, the world pausing to honor the life and legacy of the queen of rock and roll, as we're all learning about the death of Tina Turner. Wait until you see how she's being remembered. And a split screen of 2 companies and how they're handling Pride Month and adjusting to right-wing backlash to their support for the LGBTQ+ community. We're live with more on Target and Bud Light a little bit later on in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and tonight Ron DeSantis is doing what exactly everyone thought Ron DeSantis would do, making it official that he's running for president. He's filing all the paperwork in just the last few hours. But how he's doing it is not exactly how everyone thought Ron DeSantis would do it, since he's set to launch his campaign, not with the rally, not with the speech, but with a chat on Twitter. Just the audio, no video, alongside Elon Musk, as first reported by NBC News. We've got our team standing by, ready to listen to all of it, like whether he tips his hand as to how he plans to try to topple the Goliath of the GOP right now, former President Donald Trump. Governor DeSantis will have money, apparently, with one source telling our team that a big group backing him has a budget of $200 million. What are they going to do with that money? They plan to hire 2,600 people to get out in the field by Labor Day to try to knock on the door of every potential DeSantis voter in primary states 4 times. So that's 4 door knocks, 5 if you live in Iowa. The question is the Florida governor who voters want as the country's president? It's not super clear, at least not right now, with a new poll out today showing DeSantis trailing Donald Trump by 27 points. That is a way bigger gap from the 4-point lead Mr. Trump had in the same poll back in March. And we know what the former president thinks of DeSantis. You just have to look at the key word highlighted right there, disloyal. The folks in Florida who our team's hearing from, they feel divided.
I believe President Trump is the man that can bring us across the finish line.
I wish it would only be Trump and DeSantis, because I honestly think DeSantis would win.
For months, DeSantis has tried to prove to Republicans that he's the guy who can successfully tackle the culture war issues that they care about, right? Who can go up against these so-called woke progressives, as he's put it, with a wave of new laws in his state. Just look, since March, he's loosened restrictions to carry a gun. He's put in place a 6-week abortion ban. He's lowered the threshold for the death penalty, tightened restrictions on undocumented immigrants, pushed ahead in his fight against Disney, expanded his so-called don't say gay rule in schools, banned public schools from spending money on diversity initiatives, and outlawed gender-affirming surgeries for transgender minors. Dasha Burns is live for us in Miami tonight. We're going to get into that policy in a second, Dasha, because that policy relates to the politics for 2024. But let's start with what we think we'll see. We think in 57 minutes from now, if nothing goes wrong on Twitter Spaces, and that is this official rollout, this announcement in this conversation with Elon Musk. Give us a vibe check from the folks you're talking to in his orbit. Are they feeling good about how this is going to go down?
Well, look, I think what we need to expect tonight is the unexpected. And that, again, is sort of the point here. And it is a big departure from the context in which we've seen the Florida governor over the past few months. You know, he's been on the not campaign trail. He's been traveling to early states, touting his Florida blueprint. But he's been doing so with speeches that have been fairly scripted. He hasn't been taking any questions. This is very different from that, a huge departure. It's going to be with Elon Musk, who is an unpredictable individual. We don't know exactly how this is going to play out. So I think there's a lot of excitement within the campaign, according to the sources that I've been talking to. But also, they know that this is a high-risk, high-reward kind of situation, Hallie.
We laid out some of the ways that Ron DeSantis has tried to take on what's been described as the progressive agenda in Florida, leaning into these so-called culture war issues. You know this. I've talked to people close to him just in the last 24 hours who say that's going to be the key to their strategy longer term, to try to position DeSantis as this fighter who can win on these issues that conservatives care about, implicitly, right, knocking Donald Trump as a loser, as somebody who can't win. That's going to be part of it, too.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And they are going to focus hard on policy. That is the big advantage that the campaign sees DeSantis has over Trump, is the fact that over the last several years as governor and over the last just several weeks here in Florida, as legislative session has come to a close, he has signed an unprecedented number of bills here that are changing the way Florida operates in everything from the education sector to the healthcare sector to when it comes to Second Amendment rights, to you name it. He has touched so many aspects of life for Florida residents, and he is going to be using that to say, hey, I'm not just talk, I am action, and look at me taking on the quote unquote woke mob, as he likes to call it, here in Florida, and I'm going to do that nationally. And so that is going to be a massive part of the platform. You're going to hear them tout what he has done over and over and over again.
Dasha Burns, I know you're standing by next hour for when this actually goes down. We're obviously going to have it live right here on NBC News Now, the coverage of that. Thank you, Dasha. I want to bring in Steve Kornacki now. What's interesting here, and we alluded to it at the top of the show, Steve, right, is that Ron DeSantis' altitude has descended since, let's say, December, January, over the spring. Now, the huge caveat to all of this, as I know I don't have to tell you, is the actual voting isn't going to start for months. It is still super duper early. So grain of salt on the polling here, but it is a bit of a snapshot, at least of the state of the race right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Hallie, because, I mean, look, here's the list of candidates that in the next hour, I guess we expect DeSantis to be joining. And then there's also this second list of potential candidates who've been making noise the last few months. And I think part of that is related to what you're talking about, where DeSantis, you know, a lot of buzz early in the year. Polling hasn't, you know, tracked with that so far. And so I think you've got some others now saying, hey, maybe there's an opening for me. So you take a look. This is the Real Clear Politics average right here. And you see, obviously, that Trump's way out in front. DeSantis is sitting there now over 20%, but it was tighter at the start of the year. But there is a big line there after DeSantis. Everybody else is mid-single digits or lower. And so I think this is the challenge. This is the question for DeSantis as he launches this campaign. Has a chance to kind of hit the reset button here. Is he able in the next couple weeks to move that number up, to get closer to Trump and to really make this look like a Trump or DeSantis race and to leave everyone else in the dust? And would that potentially cause some of these potential candidates not to run? Would that, you know, hurt them in their ability to gain traction? Because what DeSantis really wants, obviously everyone's always wanted against Trump, is that clear one-on-one shot. Does this launch with DeSantis give him an opportunity to move up toward that?
I sort of sigh when I hear that, Steve, because I'll tell you that folks close to DeSantis will kind of brush off the numbers, at least right now, they think. In the words of one source that I spoke with, you know, this is still early days, basically. But when I hear the phrase, like, let's get to a head-to-head matchup, like, did we forget about 2016, right? Because, I mean, in that instance, there are just, it feels like there are lessons from 2016 that could play out as it relates to 2024.
Well, yeah, and I think that gets to it. If DeSantis is able to run an impressive campaign here, connect with voters, do well as he campaigns in these early states, does he head off what happened in 16? Because what happened in 16 was you had a bunch of candidates.
There was no head-to-head.
Right. There was a bunch of candidates in the mid-double digits here, and it was very so. And in fact, take a look at this. This is 2016. This is how Trump got the nomination. You had 4 standalone contests in February before you got to the biggies. And if you remember, Trump lost the first one. Ted Cruz beat him in Iowa, and there was all the talk that, hey, maybe this Trump thing is going to fall apart. He bounced back in New Hampshire, in part because the field was so muddled. Remember, Chris Christie went after Ron DeSantis, and that debate really took him down a notch. Then Trump was able to win with less than a third, a little bit less than a third of the vote in South Carolina. He was off and running. What nobody was able to do that entire campaign in 2016 on the Republican side was score 2 back-to-back big wins over Trump. Could DeSantis do what Cruz did, win Iowa? Could DeSantis roll it into New Hampshire and win there? Trump was never tested in that scenario, losing 2 in a row in 16. And I think that's one of the questions with DeSantis, if he can get this going.
Steve Kornacki back at the big board, the early days of what will be 75 more weeks, Steve, for you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We'll have more of this coverage coming up tonight here at 6 o'clock Eastern on NBC News Now. But we've also got to get to Washington and some brand new details about the suspect accused of crashing a truck on purpose just steps from the White House, right across the street. allegedly telling agents he wanted to seize power and would kill the president if he needed to. These details coming from his first appearance in federal court in just the last few hours. No cameras in court, but our producer is there, who tells us prosecutors say the 19-year-old from Missouri is legally here in this country on a green card. Right now, he's facing a charge of something called depredation. That's basically damaging property. I want to bring in Ryan Nobles, who's been covering this for us. Talk us through the latest here, Ryan.
So today was an initial appearance in federal court, Hallie, to answer the long list of charges that Saikandula is facing. And as you rightly point out, the most revealing thing that came out of court this morning, this afternoon, I should say, was that he is not a United States citizen. He is here on a temporary, or I should say as a permanent resident, a legal permanent resident under a green card. And we know that he was a high school student in Chesterfield, Missouri, just about 6 months ago. So we're still trying to figure out exactly his motivations. Obviously, from the court documents, we've heard a lot about his, somewhat of his appreciation, if you will, for the Nazi Party, for Hitler, for some other white supremacist ideology. But we also know that law enforcement sources tell us that there is a concern that there might be a mental health issue here as well. So there is still a lot that investigators have to unpack as this case moves forward, Hallie.
And we had it on the air, Ryan, as those documents first came out just about 23 hours ago now. And as we've sort of looked through them and have learned more from them, the suspect was fairly clear, according to these documents, with Secret Service agents about what he had hoped to do. It's scary.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. I mean, his goal, and, probably wasn't that well of a thought-out plan, but his goal was to try and drive that U-Haul as far as he could into the White House complex. And he said that he wanted to capture and then kill the president of the United States. And, we do have a little bit of knowledge of his timeline. He bought a one-way ticket to Dulles International Airport, which is just outside Washington, D.C. He rented that U-Haul in Herndon, Virginia, about an hour away from Washington, and then just basically drove straight to the White House and crashed into those barriers in Lafayette Park. And if you've ever been to Washington, D.C., Lafayette Park is only a block away from the White House, literally right across the street. You can see the White House North Lawn from where he crashed into those barriers. But the security posture there worked. He wasn't going anywhere past those barricades that he ended up running into. So Secret Service was able to get on the scene very quickly. And it's also important to point out here, Hallie, that if that truck had been filled with something, explosive, some other sort of incendiary device, it may not have hurt anyone at the White House, but it could have done a lot of damage in a very highly populated part of Washington, D.C. The classic Hay Adams Hotel, which is right across the street from Lafayette Park, was evacuated as a result of it. So it does demonstrate this kind of increasing threat against government officials, government buildings, and others. The Department of Homeland Security putting out a warning to that effect today. That this is something that they are fearful could happen more and more as we lead up to the 2024 election. Hallie.
Ryan Nobles live for us in Washington. Ryan, thank you. So Alec Murdaugh, you know his name, convicted of murdering his wife and son in the so-called trial of the century in South Carolina. He is now facing new charges tonight, indicted by a federal grand jury. The issue now, financial fraud, allegedly. He's looking at 22 charges, including money laundering. What's this all about? One alleged scheme says that Murdaugh is accused of keeping for himself $3.5 million from a settlement with the estate of his housekeeper, who died after what's been described as a fall at the Murdaugh home. In another alleged plot that apparently lasted more than 15 years, Murdaugh is accused of routing and redirecting other clients' settlement funds to himself. His lawyers say he's cooperating with the investigation and that they think this is going to get resolved quickly without a trial. Remember, Murdaugh's already been sentenced to life in prison for his family's double murder. He is appealing that conviction. I want to bring in Danny Savalos, who's joining us now. We had known, right, even during the double murder trial, as Murdaugh was going through it, that there were a whole slew of other charges that he could potentially face, right, or a whole slew of other issues that could be a concern for him down the road, separate from the death of his wife and son. Talk us through this indictment here.
Yeah, Murdoch handed this case to federal prosecutors on a silver platter during his state court trial for the killings of his wife and son when he took the stand, and understandably in an effort to paint himself as credible, an effort that failed, he essentially admitted to a number of economic crimes but said, I may be an economic criminal, but I am not this criminal. I'm not a killer. That's in essence what he said on the stand. It was a gambit that did not work because the risk was that he would be essentially admitting much of the elements of these crimes that he's now charged with in this federal indictment that you see right there.
There's also another case where he's set to be deposed in a wrongful death lawsuit from this boat crash back in 2019. What are the details?
Well, this is essentially a civil case in which he's being, they're attempting to hold him liable. The theory being negligent entrustment of the boat. So, I mean, it's a civil case. It doesn't carry the same kinds of penalties as obviously a criminal case. But of course, in terms of the order of woes that Murdoch has faced, this is certainly a distant third after his murder conviction, which he's still fighting on appeal, and this current indictment, which will add years upon years to his already state sentence. Then, in theory, if he ever finishes that, he'll have to walk over to the federal lockup and then serve his federal sentence.
Danny Savalos, thank you very much for that. It is impossible to forget the horror 1 year ago today in Uvalde when 19 little kids, fourth graders, were massacred along with 2 of their teachers. And it is inexplicable to so many that a year later, those families still do not have answers, still do not have accountability for why it took police so long to take that shooter down. That pain, raw and fresh again today on this day of remembrance for those children at Robb Elementary School. You can see it here. Memorials set up to honor some of the faces that you're about to see. The students and teachers murdered in one of the deadliest school shootings in American history. And for the people who love them, a nightmare still.
I put her in that classroom. I left her there that day. I didn't move out of Uvalde as fast as we should have. We were looking to do that. it all comes back to me. To know that my child was scared and alone in her last moments, terrified. There's no reason for that. I'll never be able to wrap my head around that.
Some families now still have questions about why it took police more than an hour to get inside that classroom and kill the attacker, something that was followed by conflicting accounts about what actually happened. Guad Venegas is joining us now live from Texas. Guad, we see the memorials behind you. We know that there is still frustration a year later. We've heard it from the city's mayor about the pace of the investigations here. Talk about the accountability piece of this and the anger and the pain that so many people still feel for not having some of these answers.
Hallie, as you mentioned, the mayor talked about this. He also mentioned that the city officials were kept out or have been kept out of this investigation. Meanwhile, the district attorney says there is no timeline, so we really don't know when this investigation will be complete, and the people of Uvalde will have an explanation as to what happened. And you described it with, by mentioning the frustration. People here are frustrated because of that lack of answers and accountability. When you talk about the response, right? The question is, what happened for that hour and whatever minutes, 77 minutes to be exact, that the officers waited in those hallways? It wasn't just one agency. So we had police from the school district, local Uvalde police, state police, as well as federal officers, which were the ones that eventually confronted the gunners. So a lot of the people in Uvalde want to understand why they stayed there and who was ultimately responsible. This is what that investigation would inform the people of, what exactly failed. And of course, they can't do that. So there's also a sense of a lack of closure from the people here waiting for these results as they try to overcome the emotional damage that this has, of course, caused. And then you not only have the victims that died and their family members, but you also have survivors, students, children that were shot and have recovered physically, emotionally, and mentally. Now, the school district is trying to move forward, right, Hallie? They have made changes to the schools, and they shut down Robb Elementary. They're planning to start building a new elementary school this summer. So they're trying to move forward as best as possible, but it's going to be difficult to get that trust back. Here's the superintendent speaking about what the school district has done.
We've progressed a lot rapidly with fencing and rekeying and securing our exterior doors. We've got 600 new cameras. They're safe, but there's still a lot of parents who don't feel safe.
Now, a lot of parents still don't feel like it's safe to send their kids to school. And just to get some perspective, one of the parents that was speaking earlier this week talked about what it's like to have a daughter that was in Robb Elementary when the shooting happened. And she said, look, sometimes she doesn't want to go out with me. She doesn't want to go to the store with me, but she also doesn't want to stay home alone. So whenever I go outside, someone has to stay home with her so she's not alone, but I can't take her with me because she's scared of going outside. You can only imagine what it's like for a student like that to go back to a school. So some of the students have actually chosen not to go back to school, to be homeschooled. We know that some families have also moved away. So there's a lot of work to be done. But of course, there is that issue with the investigation and the closure that a lot of the people will be looking for as they get these answers, if they get these answers when that investigation concludes.
I think it's so important that you're reflecting back to us what you're hearing from the people that you're talking to in the community, people who have left, people who have their kids now pulled out of that school district. I know that part of this was sort of part of the mood and the moment of today is this desire for it to be a somber remembrance squad, right? And not like frankly, a circus, a media circus. The tone of today is critically important to people where you are.
Hallie, it is, not just for the community, but also for members of the media. Everyone who was here a year ago was trying to cover this story, also question authorities, right? There was the accountability where, if you remember, state authorities gave some information that then they stepped back on, and it wasn't totally clear. So the media has taken a different approach, respecting the community here. There's a vigil tonight, a candlelight vigil, where they've asked the media to keep a distance, to not come with big cameras, and that is something that has been communicated to the media. And what I can say, Hallie, when you talk to members of the community here, friends and family members of the victims and other members of the community, they might have different opinions on how to move forward when it comes to new gun control reform or other things. But today, everyone is together, supporting each other on a day to heal as they come here one day after this shooting happened.
You referenced the idea that people may not be on the same page as it relates to what the next steps should be when it comes to, for example, the potential for stricter gun laws in the state or federally. We know where the president stands on that. He obviously delivered remarks today on this remembrance of a year since that Uvalde attack, that school shooting. We know what he wants to see. He wants to see stricter gun laws in place. We also know the reality, the appetite, Guad, in the city that I cover, which is Washington, D.C., and federally, no significant action on that front. What do you hear from people about that?
So, Hallie, the conversation today has been about the memorials, about the events, to have that moral support for each other, and also that investigation that hasn't concluded. But last year, we were here for over a week after this incident happened, having those conversations. And since then, we've had conversations with the people of the community here. So what we hear are different opinions. People that have guns, others that don't own guns, different opinions on how to move forward and what type of gun reform they would like to see. We've seen different proposals at a federal level and a state level. What I can tell you, Hallie, that I've been talking about all day is that most of the people that speak to us here in Uvalde seem to agree on one thing, at least from the conversations we've had. And that one thing is they keep telling me they would like to see the age change from 18 to 21 for an individual to own or buy an assault rifle like the one that was used in Uvalde, something that was proposed here in Texas not so long ago. There was some potential for that bill to go through, but eventually it stalled. So there comes the frustration from a lot of the family members and members of the community here saying that they haven't seen change when it comes to the state legislature here in Texas, Hallie.
Guad Venegas, thank you very much. Just in the last hour or so, we've seen House Republican negotiators wrapping up talks over at the White House. They're trying to get past what a Democratic official familiar with these negotiations calls a speed bump, right? Because think about the timing here. There is maybe a week plus left before the U.S. is going to run out of money, according to the Treasury Secretary, to pay the bills that the U.S. owes. And that would be, if it happens, a catastrophic global economic meltdown. I mean, that's the prediction from everybody that you talk to, experts, financial experts. Like, if the U.S. defaults on its debt, if we can't pay what we owe, huge problems globally. We have heard from one of the members of House leadership in just the last couple of minutes that members are probably going to be able to go home for Memorial Day weekend. They're going to have to stay close, get back if there is a deal. But that gives you a signal on where things stand now. Here's House Speaker Kevin McCarthy.
We are still far apart. I mean, it didn't seem like it'd be this hard. Look, I think we can make progress today. I'm hoping that we can make progress.
Keep in mind that the Treasury Secretary has said as early as June 1st is when we will probably run out of money. Listen.
We're a country that has paid all of our bills on time since 1789, and it's critical to recognize how important that is to the United States leadership in the global economy.
So let's bring it down to a human level, right? How does this affect your life? If you're like Hallie, I don't live in Washington. I'm not, what does this mean for my life? Well, if you get Social Security, something you should care about here, right? If the U.S. does default. If you have a 401k, if you got money in the markets, something you should care about, right? Markets could crash. If you're a veteran, let's say, think about this. The U.S. government owes $12 billion in stuff like pensions, disability compensation, education help to veterans. That bill comes due June 1st, and if there's not enough money to pay for that, people who have already sacrificed for their country may have to sacrifice more. Shaq Brewster is joining us now with this piece of the story here. So the idea that a Dem is saying speed bump here, the idea that members of Congress on the House side are going to get to go home for Memorial Day, which gives you a sign of where things stand here. Slow down, if not a complete stop here. Talk us through some of where this is and what you're hearing from some of the people who are going to have their lives potentially affected by this if the U.S. kind of can't pay what it owes here.
Well, Hallie, look, this is crunch time, and that news from Capitol Hill that members will be able to go home for Memorial Day, that's not a positive sign that you're hearing. We know that negotiators met for about 4 hours today, this time at the White House campus, and there's no sign that there was any breakthrough, any deal here. As we understand these negotiations, the White House currently, after saying they won't negotiate on the debt ceiling, their latest proposal shows some agreement, some movement on the idea of pulling back some of those unused COVID relief dollars. But where there is disagreement is the idea of spending. The White House is proposing that they freeze spending at current levels and set a cap for the next 2 years. That would save about $1 trillion over the next decade. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy completely rejected that. Some of his members saying you shouldn't even compromise anymore at this point. Kevin McCarthy saying that as far as you should go, that any deal would require a reduction of spending from last year's levels. And that's causing some Democrats to say, hey, with the far-right members of his caucus, there's no deal to be had. And our colleague Garrett Haake asked the speaker about this earlier today. I want you to listen to a little bit of that exchange.
What do you say to those who believe you can't get to yes because so many members of your conference won't accept anything less than the bill you've already passed?
They're wrong. You know, you underestimated me the whole time. The one thing you should learn from me, I will never give up for the American people.
And the other factor here is the timeline, Hallie. House Republicans say they will give their caucus 72 hours to read any bill that comes that they'll have to vote on, any agreement that comes about. They say that they'll call members back and give them 24 hours heads up to return to D.C. So you're running out of time as we get closer to the Memorial Day holiday.
Real quick, Shaq, I want to get to the point where this matters to human people who care about their money, which everybody does, right? Including people who have sacrificed for our country, and that's veterans. That's the piece of the story that you're working today, and I'm incredibly interested in that because I think it puts a face on this whole thing.
Yeah, there's increasing concern, increasing fear, increasing, frankly, anger from veterans who are relying on things like disability checks, who are relying on some of the medical assistance that the federal government provides. You saw that graphic. There's a bill. The federal government has to pay about $12 billion to veteran programs on June 1st. That's the same date that the Treasury Secretary says the United States government doesn't know if they'll have enough cash. So I want you to listen to what some veterans told me about what could happen, what it would mean for them if there's a delay to any of those payments.
I do get a retirement check. I do get VA disability. So when you hear there's the possibility it could go away, it makes you wonder.
For me, it would, I would stop getting any type of payment. So that would definitely put us in a financial hardship.
Important to note here, Hallie, we don't know what will happen, what gets paid for and what payments will be delayed if there is that default. But that uncertainty is not providing much relief to our nation's veterans.
Shaq Brewster live for us there in Iowa. Shaq, thank you for that angle. Appreciate it. Coming up, while one Florida school is cutting back on access to a poem read at President Biden's inauguration and how that now famous poet is responding to it. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, Meta, which owns Facebook and Insta, is doing layoff round number 3, starting that up today, focusing mainly on employees of the business groups of the company compared to last month's layoffs affecting tech employees. We're talking about 10,000 workers approximately set to lose their job between all these cuts. Number 2, poet Amanda Gorman says she is gutted after a Florida elementary school restricted access to one of her poems. It happened because one parent objected to the poem, The Hill We Climb. If that's familiar to you, remember when she did this at President Biden's inauguration. It was this sort of significant moment in that process. The Miami-Dade County Public Schools says the book has not been banned, but it was moved to the middle school section of the library. Number 3, former President Jimmy Carter is reportedly in good spirits 3 months after entering end-of-life care at home. His family says he's visiting with them. He's eating a lot of peanut butter ice cream. He's getting updates on his charity's humanitarian work, too. Number 4, raw cookie dough is apparently behind a bunch of salmonella outbreaks all across the country, according to the CDC. The agency says people in at least 6 states got sick after eating Papa Murphy's take-and-bake cookie dough. At least 2 people ended up in the hospital. The CDC says there are probably more infections. Nobody has died from this yet. The company says they've obviously temporarily stopped selling the raw cookie dough. Cook it before you eat it. Number 5, a guy from New York just finished a cross-country trip on his skateboard, 3,000 miles coast to coast to raise money for addiction awareness. If you've ever wondered how long it would take to skateboard from California to Virginia, 57 days. That's a world record. I guess Guinness says it is a manually powered skateboard, like no engine. So there you go. Still to come here on the show. You know, sales of Bud Light tanking a couple months after this backlash we've talked about over that partnership with the trans influencer. We'll talk about why customers are not coming back with our own Miguel Almaguer in just a minute. There's this zoo in Florida saying sorry to basically an entire country. We're going to explain why later in the local. But first, let's get to this Target thing, right? Have you heard about this? Target is pulling some of its merch celebrating Pride Month after they got backlash from some people, creating an apparent safety issue for workers at the store. Target says in a statement that since introducing this year's Pride collection, they've gotten threats that affect how safe their workers feel. Target said it's pulling all this stuff at the center of the most significant confrontational behavior. I'm quoting there, the most significant confrontational behavior. They're not saying exactly which ones. The line came out earlier this month. It features stuff like a Live, Laugh, Lesbian shirt and a mug that says gender fluid. We're seeing this happen as the fight, or frankly, the divide, is escalating in this country about rights of members of the LGBTQ plus community. I want to bring in Miguel Almaguer. What is so interesting about this story, Miguel, is that this is yet another instance. We're going to talk about Bud Light in a minute, where Target, this company, is navigating how to celebrate Pride. We saw it here in LA with the Dodgers, right? They had something similar, too.
That's exactly right.
In Target's instance, they put out this Pride merch, basically the shirts, the mugs, whatever, got a bunch of backlash, right? In some instances now, they're actually moving it back in the back of stores, pulling it off of shelves. What's happening?
So Target did get backlash. There was a products, they rolled out about 2,000 products for Pride Month, which they have done for the last 10 years.
That's not new.
No, that's new. They've been doing that for 10 years. And so it's something they've established a long time ago. And there was backlash over these products and the placements in the store. And then we saw these viral videos of people coming into the stores, kicking over the product stands, tossing the merchandise on the ground. And Target basically said our employees are threatened by this behavior, and we need to either pull this merchandise or move it to another part of the store. Citing that concern, Target also said we're going to roll back in the areas where some of this merchandise is placed. Now, we also spoke to some customers. They had mixed reviews. It doesn't really matter from what we heard what your stance is on the merchandise. People, for the most part, said that employees need to be protected. Here's what they said.
Everyone has their own way of thinking now, so they should respect and whoever believes in what they are, and then just let them be.
I think they should do what's best for the employees since they're there and they're the ones actually getting harassed. And the LGBTQ community should be open to that and respect it.
So you have people who shop at Target regularly who are concerned about employees who they see every day, but you also have folks who are really angry about some of the products that they're seeing. But as you mentioned, these products have been in the store for about a decade.
This has taken off online in a lot of ways, but as we all know, Miguel, not everything you see online is true, right? So there was rumors, I understand that, like, for example, they were selling quote-unquote tuck-friendly bathing suits for kids. That is not actually true. I mean, there was misinformation around some of this.
Complete misinformation, which kind of fueled some of the controversy here. Target has over 2,000 products. They wouldn't say what items they pooled, but that tuck-friendly swimsuit was one of the issues that seemed to be generating a lot of buzz online. There was misinformation that said these tuck-friendly swimsuits were being marketed and sold to children. Completely
that
false.
Was not true. And tuck-friendly indicating for people to wear when they're doing drag, for example, et cetera.
Correct.
Or just people who are trans.
Or transitioning. Right. And it's this attire that they can wear while swimming. And it simply wasn't true. It wasn't the case. It didn't matter. It fueled all of this controversy online, which drove people into the stores who were upset, who were angry, who kind of, did this demonstration inside the store, kicking over signs in the stands.
Is there concern on the part of Target? Can we infer this from the statements about how this might affect their business, like the bottom line?
Well, Target didn't say they were going to pull all of the products, and they simply said they're part of a company that's inclusive and they want diversity. Yeah. So they seem to be kind of walking and straddling that line.
Miguel Almaguer, thank you for being on top of this story for us. Good to be with you as well. We talked about Target. We talked about the Dodgers. Let's talk about Bud Light, right? Because it's been a couple of months since that partnership with transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney. But we found out today that Bud Light sales are down, and not by an insignificant amount, right? Look at these numbers from Beer Business Daily. Bud Light sales have gone down almost 30% in each of the last few weeks following this trend that's been happening ever since this partnership had rolled out, and we saw that backlash to it. You remember the backlash, right? There was the sponsored post that Mulvaney shared on Instagram to her 1.5 million followers, 1.2 million followers. It was from March Madness. There was conservative pushback to this, conservative backlash. You had customers posting videos. They were like trashing the cans. Kid Rock was like shooting the cans. They were dumping out the beer, et cetera. A spokesperson for Anheuser-Busch InBev, which is the parent company of Bud Light, did not respond to a request for comment on these numbers, but I want to bring in Brian Chung, who's joining us now. The response initially from Bud Light was to ignore, right? Then they put some of their marketing executives on leave. They released this sort of ad campaign that was very Americana vibes, right? Very like patriotic Americana. And yet here we are 2 months later still talking about this, right? I mean, it is as we were talking about with Miguel as it relates to Target and a question mark there. There's no question mark for Bud Light that this has affected their bottom line.
It is affecting their bottom line, and this is a situation where they have appeared to anger both camps here. Now, when we talk about what's happening here, again, as you mentioned, this concerns the post that was made by Dylan Mulvaney during March Madness. It was essentially a sponsored post that was broadcast, by the way, to her 1.2 million followers, which began boycotts from some anti-trans community members who argued that they didn't want to consume or support this business anymore because of their support of this particular account. Now, for that reason, there was some scrambling within Bud Light, where, as you mentioned, they tried to ignore it at first, and then they ultimately put their marketing executives on leave. But now you have a situation where some LGBTQ plus communities are now boycotting Bud Light because of that response. So very much explaining why we saw that decline of sales of almost 30%.
It's not just Bud Light, right? I mean, there's a bunch of beers and drinks that Anheuser-Busch makes.
Yeah, well, when we talk about Anheuser-Busch, you look at the portfolio of other types of brands, Stella Artois, Corona as well, and you're hearing some likes of the bars in Chicago, for example. One that's called Sidetrack. They posted an Instagram post that said, we got to hold brands accountable, so we're going to boycott all of the Anheuser-Busch products, which speaks to how it's not just Bud Light.
It has become political. I mean, Bud Light, this issue has become political. And just today, we heard from Nikki Haley about it. She's obviously, of course, a Republican running for president here. I want to play a clip of that.
Anybody know about Dylan Mulvaney? The Bud Light person? Make no mistake. That is a guy dressed up like a girl, mocking women. Women don't act like that.
So here Nikki Haley is pulling in this issue on the campaign trail here. Again, I think an indication of how this sort of culture war, so-called culture war stuff is playing out.
Yeah, well, and you kind of make the argument here that politics is kind of increasing the cultural zeitgeist of this type of conversation. And you're seeing it happening very much with drag shows around the country, a lot of localities trying to ban those types of shows. And the trans story is very much going to be very big as we get into the more ramped up political conversation ahead of 2024, especially Ron DeSantis entering the ring as well. But you do have these open questions here about how the political conversations are going to drive what's happening in the business community as well, as we've seen with Anheuser-Busch in the previous few weeks. Hallie.
Brian Chung, great to see you. Thank you very much. Coming up here on the show, some mysterious attacks inside Russia the U.S. is trying to distance itself from. We've got the latest from our reporter in Ukraine. Plus, you heard Brian talk about Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Well, in just about 10 minutes, we think he is set to publicly announce officially he's running for president in 2024, live on Twitter. We'll have that. The U.S. is distancing itself from a raid into Russian territory by pro-Ukraine fighters who appeared to use U.S. military equipment in the attack. Moscow saying today it fought off the assault into its Belgorod region after 2 days of fighting. We're learning more about who might be behind that attack. A spokesperson for the Ukrainian military says these attackers were Russian citizens from a group called the Russian Volunteer Corps and the Freedom of Russia Legion as well. Here's NBC's Molly Hunter with more.
Hallie, good to be with you. Now, this story has been a really wild ride since it first kind of came onto our radar a couple of days ago. Videos started to emerge earlier this week of a very brazen cross-border attack by, anti-Kremlin, anti-Putin Russian militias, essentially. But what's so interesting is new video came out today showing these militants, and they're in uniform, Hallie. They're wearing Ukrainian flags. They're wearing armbands. In one of the videos, you can see American-made tactical vehicles, MRAPs and Humvees. Now, this got everyone's attention, of course. And actually, these fighters, they're members of two different groups, the Russian Volunteer Corps, the Freedom of Russia Legion, held a press conference today where they answered questions about where they get their support, where they got those vehicles, because this raises serious questions. Were these vehicles, tactical vehicles, in the hands of the Ukrainian military? Is that how they got over? Well, that is certainly what the Kremlin is saying. So the Kremlin is calling these guys Ukrainian nationalists and terrorists. They are saying that they are absolutely backed by the Ukrainian government. The Ministry of Defense even sent kind of a huge counterterrorism sweep in that border region just across from where I am, where that initial assault happened. The Ukrainian government is saying very clearly they have no contact, no involvement with these groups. And the State Department, Hallie, is actually weighing in now. Because of those American-made weapons, they are saying in the briefing earlier today, they have seen the reports, they are looking into it, but absolutely, Hallie, they do not support U.S.-made military equipment being used inside Russia. All of this happens, and I think there are a lot of questions about why this kind of brazen border attack happened this week. All of this comes, of course, as the regular Ukrainian military is planning their counteroffensive. Hallie?
Our thanks to Molly Hunter for that reporting. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Midwest Bureau, officials in Kentucky say an inmate convicted of a double murder is loose, is on the run, escaped from this prison in Ohio along with another inmate who was later captured. You see them both here. There's a $20,000 reward for any info leading to his arrest. Out of our Southern Bureau, a zoo in Miami says it's sorry it offended a nation. Why? Videos of guests petting the zoo's kiwi bird under bright lights made a lot of New Zealanders angry. It's one of the country's national birds. More than 10,000 people signed an online petition called Help Save This Mistreated Kiwi. The zoo says it is now ending that Pet a Kiwi program. And out of our Northeast Bureau, Fleet Week has begun in New York City with ships arriving for this big annual kind of spectacle here. A celebration of the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard. Thousands of people are expected to participate. A whole bunch of free events from today through Memorial Day. Coming up here on the show, when we come back, people in Guam just waking up to damage from the biggest storm to hit the island in decades. We'll tell you about that super typhoon and where it's headed next. Plus, we're just minutes away from Ron DeSantis announcing, or at least set to, his run for the White House on Twitter Spaces. We'll have it for you when we come back. Right now, tens of thousands of people in Guam don't have any power after the island got just slammed by this super typhoon overnight, the strongest storm to hit Guam in decades. So strong, it actually broke the sensors to figure out how strong the wind is, along with some other radar equipment. And check out this truck. It's like toppling over. Look at that. The wind is picking up that truck and spinning it out. That's how intense it is. The hood of the car you're about to see just got destroyed with the trees blowing sideways. I mean, absolutely sideways. Guam's Homeland Security called it a triple threat with winds of 150 miles an hour, tons of rain, and a life-threatening storm surge. There haven't been any reports of any injuries, fortunately, although the caveat here is that it could take a very long time, days, maybe even weeks, to figure out nationally what the damage is in Guam. The weather service there hasn't even hit the roads yet.
It's just too risky to be out on the roads. Too many flying debris. Tree tops are coming down, palm fronds, coconuts, other projectiles.
I want to bring in Bill Cairns now, and the images are just wild as we're seeing it from how intense the storm is. It's headed toward Taiwan, right, and could be almost just as intense when it heads there.
It's going to be around for a couple of days. So, Hallie, 170,000 Americans live on Guam. A lot of people don't even realize that fact. And they had a sleepless night last night. They were in the dark. The wind was howling outside. They had no communications, power's out, and it was a sleepless night. Now, the sun came up about 2 hours ago in Guam. So we were starting to see some initial images, like images of people, what they see in their own neighborhood, but we don't yet have a good sense of just how extensive the damage is. A lot of the buildings in Guam are made of concrete, and it's because they get a lot of typhoons, but there's a lot of tree damage, there's a lot of roof damage. We don't quite know yet about the infrastructure, how bad the storm surge was, landslide, mudslides. We estimate winds were 105. We know for a fact that was the last reading we had before the sensor broke, but they were probably up to about 135 to 140 at their max. And we also know that we had about a foot of rain, so landslides and mudslides were also likely to have occurred. So here's Guam, and there's the eye of the storm. And actually, it strengthened a lot today as it was leaving Guam. So the winds in Guam have been at tropical storm strength for 24 hours. They had 8 hours of hurricane strength winds, and the storm will slowly be heading out as we go throughout their afternoon and evening today. And then, as you mentioned, it's a beast of a storm, 165-mile-per-hour winds. I mean, that's past a Category 5 by our hurricane standards. And here's Taiwan. So this is Tuesday into early next week. It should be weakening a little bit, but that'll be a story to watch over the holiday weekend.
Bill Cairns, sure will. Thank you for being on it for us. Appreciate it. That does it for us this hour. We've got more coverage picking up right now. Hey there, I'm Hallie Jackson, and we're coming on the air for hour number 2 tonight because we are about to hear Ron DeSantis do exactly what everybody thought Ron DeSantis would do. Make it official that he's running for president. How he's doing it, well, that may not be what exactly everybody thought Ron DeSantis would do. He's not doing a speech. He's not doing a rally. He's doing it on Twitter with this guy, Elon Musk. It's going to be an audio-only Twitter Spaces conversation. Supposed to start at 6. It is like 6 o'clock and 20 seconds right now. Hasn't begun just yet. Okay, not a surprise. Things run late in politics. Got it. We're keeping an ear on it, of course. In this move by DeSantis, that is definitely different, right? And that is a feature, not a bug, in the eyes of people close to his campaign, close to his team. I want to show you, I think we have the feed. If we can at least show it to you, that's it. That's what it looks like. If you've never been on a Twitter Spaces, well, welcome to the internet, folks. We've got our panel posted up covering every angle of this announcement because it is a significant moment in the 2024 race. Dasha Burns is live for us in Miami. Chuck Todd is back home in Washington. We've also got Vaughn Hilliard and Steve Kovac for us in New York. Let's start, of course, Dasha, with you in Florida, the tip of the spear on our reporting here on the DeSantis campaign. So here, the table is set, right? Dinner shall be served soon, we presume. Ron DeSantis has noticed this, right? We know Elon Musk is there. He's sending out little teaser tweets about this. It is not conventional, obviously, and that's kind of the point for DeSantis.
Yep, that's exactly right. This is not like any presidential announcement we have ever seen. This is not a way that a candidate has ever used social media in the past. Elon Musk made that point at an event yesterday. And look, we know the basics of what we're about to witness here, but we don't know how this is going to play out. Neither does the campaign. Neither does Elon Musk, really. He mentioned that point as well, that this is live. And he said, let her rip just yesterday. And that's exactly what's going going to happen. This is a massive departure from the context in which we've seen the Florida governor in the past few months as he's been on his book tour / not campaign trail trip, touting his so-called Florida blueprint. He's been delivering speeches, remarks that are prepared and scripted. This is not that. So I suppose we should expect the unexpected here, Hallie. We don't really know what we're going to hear from either of them, except that we know he will announce that he's running for president. The conversation is also going to be moderated by David Sachs, who's sort of another big guy in tech. He's an Elon Musk confidant and a supporter of DeSantis as well. So the three of them, where this conversation will go, we're about to find out.
He's also, I should just note real quick, Dasha, he's also doing he's going to have a campaign video that's expected to come out. He's going to do like a Fox interview. I mean, there's going to be other things we're going to hear from him tonight.
Yep, that's exactly right. And then next week after Memorial Day, he'll take a swing through the early primary states, those critical areas. He'll do some of that retail politics. But the launch, this is the big moment, and how they execute this is going to matter. It's a bit of a high risk, high reward going unconventional like this. This is a major moment, major launching pad for the Florida governor.
And only so far 3.5 minutes delayed, Chuck Todd, which in the world of politics, not so bad, if you will. Our team understands that both Sachs and Musk are both on. I think they're waiting for DeSantis to join. Probably will any minute here. What's interesting to me is the strategy behind this launch. And that's what I want to be listening for tonight, I think, along with everybody here on this screen. DeSantis wants to position himself, according to people that I've spoken with who are close to him, as the fighter for these, quote unquote, anti-woke, anti-progressive causes here. And I want to pull up what he's done in Florida, because they're going to point to that. As Dasha knows, as she's reported, they're going to point to the things he's done, like loosening gun restrictions, putting in place a 6-week abortion ban. We'll asterisk that, because we'll come back to that in a general election, potentially. He's outlawed gender-affirming surgeries. He's furthered his Disney fight. He's expanded that controversial Don't Say Gay law in the state as well, just to name a few of the things here. We're going to be hearing a lot about this as he hopes to kind of make America Florida in his campaign.
Hallie, it's really interesting. Ron DeSantis in November of 2022 seemed like a juggernaut. Ron DeSantis at the start of this calendar year seemed like the savior for the party. And then he went through that legislative session. And they have a theory of the case. And Hallie, you outlined it. I'm hearing the same thing. Their theory of the case is go to the right of Trump, that they're going to be the better culture, the more trusted warrior, if you will, to battle the left on education, to battle the left in the corporate boardrooms, to battle the left when it comes to issues of sexuality and abortion. And while I understand that strategy on paper, it rang really familiar to me, and it probably rang familiar to you, Hallie, from the 2016 campaign, because this is what many a Republican candidate would claim. Hey, Bush isn't a real, Trump's not a real conservative. He's not conservative on this, and he's not conservative on that. And the voter didn't buy it, right? And it's interesting to me that they believe, well, we're going to really make our case this time that we're to the right of Trump. But if you're looking for a fighter, are you picking the guy who's done the fighting or the guy you haven't seen fight yet? It's a real. It's a question I have.
Steve, I want to go to you here because we asked you to join the conversation as you are kind of our guy on all things tech and all things Twitter. And as we're looking for this announcement here, we know that I am told Governor DeSantis is joined now as like a speaker. What's interesting about Spaces is you can see who else is in the virtual room, if you will. Laura Ingraham, for example, is in there. Caitlyn Jenner, some other names. This is not just politically, as Dasha and Vaughn and Chuck know, a potential risk for Ron DeSantis. He could be upstaged. Who knows what Elon Musk could say? There's kind of is there a technical risk? I mean, it's unpredictable even from just the sheer logistics of it in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, there's a technical risk if it goes crazy, and I mean, the Twitter Spaces could crash or something like that. But the real risk here is Elon Musk. He is more of a wild card than Trump in many respects, and has this kind of loose relationship with the truth. And David Sachs, who is, I guess, supposed to be moderating this, is very much, for lack of a better term, kind of one of Elon Musk's lackeys in this Twitter acquisition and helping him get Twitter and pivot Twitter into what Elon Musk wants it to be. I will also note it's really interesting, not just the Elon Musk angle, but the fact he's choosing Twitter. That's the same platform that vaulted Donald Trump into the nomination in 2016 and arguably won him the presidency. And Trump, since being reinstated on Twitter, hasn't tweeted once. He's all about Truth Social. So I can see this very much being the Truth Social versus Twitter GOP primary. We'll have to see what happens there. But I know Donald Trump has been blasting DeSantis all day leading up to this announcement on Truth Social.
Well, the simultaneous drop has happened because as this Twitter Spaces is beginning, Elon Musk is speaking now. Ron DeSantis has put out his campaign launch video. And the headline here, the great American comeback. That is how he wants to frame it. That is how he wants to phrase it. As it is now official, something that, Vaughn, as you know, people have been talking about for months, if not longer. I mean, I remember 18 months ago, I think over a year ago, I was talking with donors about who they were looking at, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this has been in the ether for a while here at this point. We're going to try to turn around some of the headlines from that video that he's just got out. Bavon, if he wants to lead the party, if he wants to lead what he's describing as a great American comeback, he's got to get over the Donald Trump piece of it first, because right now it is Donald Trump who is sitting on the throne in that GOP kingdom.
Right, and this is the issue with the fealty to Donald Trump over the last 7 years among the Republican elected officials, because I was talking to a Trump ally here today who said, look, since Donald Trump was arrested in New York City, his poll numbers have shot up over DeSantis by anywhere from 20 to 25 percentage points. And when you look at the hurdles that Donald Trump will face ahead, much of it is already a part of the public record. We were talking about the special counsel who is looking into classified documents that he took from the White House and efforts to overturn the election in 2020. But also you're looking at the hearing that could take place next spring in the heart of this primary in New York over the hush money payment. And the Trump ally was telling me that, look, that Ron DeSantis is going to be left with the choice. Either one, defend Donald Trump every week as these issues become more and more prevalent, essentially defending the frontrunner who is his top political challenger, or do you go and try to undercut him, which then just brings into question, well, were you being a fake for all intents and purposes the entire time that you were supporting Trump? Why in 2018 did you cut an ad while running for governor in which you were reading a book about how great Donald Trump was to your child? Those are the questions that Ron DeSantis is going to have to answer as a candidate when he is trying to distinguish himself from the frontrunner.
David Sachs in this Spaces saying that they are melting the servers right now for this announcement. Steve, I want to go to you because for Elon Musk, what's in it for him, right? He's said he supports Ron DeSantis. He said he's also not going to make an endorsement. He also praised Tim Scott. I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, so actually, Elon Musk told my colleague at CNBC, David Faber, last week in an interview, he just wants a normal person to be president. What that means can mean anything. Apparently, it does not mean Donald Trump. So that could be Tim Scott. That in this case, DeSantis, he's helping him launch his campaign. But bottom line, what's in it for Musk? Attention. Twitter is losing advertisers. Twitter is angering a lot of its users based on the changes Elon Musk has made, whether that's the verification process, whether it's this kind of push to the right of it. And, you know, in another time, DeSantis would be making this announcement on Fox News. I know he's going to be on Fox later, but the fact he chose Twitter as this platform and Elon Musk is into it, it tells me Musk sees an opportunity here to kind of make Twitter this like sort of online edgelord version of Fox News. And that is a really interesting move by DeSantis to choose that as the way to launch this off. And it's great for Elon Musk, because the more eyeballs that there are on Twitter, the more they can go back to advertisers who have been fleeing the platform in droves, by the way, and say, look, we got all this attention. People are announcing their candidacy for the president of the United States on our platform. This is a good opportunity just to get more eyeballs on Twitter and attract advertisers.
So we know that at least part of this rollout has happened presumably successfully, and that is this video that Ron DeSantis has put out, the idea of the great American comeback here. We're going to show you a little bit of as we're talking here. The question mark that I have, and Steve, I'll stick with you for a second here, on the Spaces piece of it, apparently the audio is going in and out. And I want to be super transparent with our audience because that's kind of what we do here on this show. We're not playing this live like for this reason, right? You don't need to hear a bunch of dead air and like who knows and lost audio and echoes. And these are some of the reports that we're getting in from the folks who are listening in on this. I mean, this is kind of part of what the question mark was as it related to this unconventional rollout from Ron DeSantis. As you see that shot there from that campaign video, and now officially making it clear that he is in the 2024 race.
Yeah, and so look, Twitter has had problems with Spaces in the past, and it's very obvious that they maybe didn't anticipate this many people to do it, but that is always a risk when you're doing something technical that could go wrong. Spaces, it did launch pre-Elon Musk, but you got to also remember Elon Musk fired thousands of his own engineers, so they're running on almost a skeleton crew based compared to what they had this time last year. So it's naturally just harder for them to keep things running for something like this. It has to be one of those, when a tech platform has a huge influx of traffic, it's all hands on deck, and there aren't as many hands literally working at Twitter as there used to be.
Elon Musk just saying that the servers are straining somewhat. And Chuck Todd, it's not like that was out of the realm of possibility for an event like this, where there is a lot of attention on it. And that's that's kind of the point with people who are close to Ron DeSantis. They wanted to get media attention. They wanted to get some headlines. They got it. But at what cost?
Well, they were going to get it no matter what they did. I just, the question is, who needs this event more, Elon Musk or Ron DeSantis, right? And it feels as if Ron DeSantis is doing Elon Musk a favor. Ron DeSantis has decided to be part of Elon Musk's marketing campaign. And that's always the risk here. You're part of essentially Elon's doing a reboot. It's not quite a startup, but a reboot. He's hired a new CEO. He's desperate to send a message to advertisers. He's desperate to send a message politically, it appears. And again, this is what makes it so risky. It's not that I think that Elon Musk acolytes aren't people that DeSantis should want with him. I get it. I think there's certainly a belief in DeSantis' world that people that love Elon Musk are the type of people that they want. But you've put your campaign into somebody else's hands. You said it earlier, Hallie. Who's going to overshadow who here at this point? I mean, it's sort of like if you decided to announce on Oprah, right? You're like, she's kind of the bigger star. Be careful if you're going to do that.
Apparently, there's something like roughly 450,000 listeners who are in this Twitter Spaces at the moment. And to that point that Chuck's making, Dasha, the aligning, the DeSantis team trying to align themselves with Elon Musk here. He is somebody who, as Chuck has laid out, has positioned himself as this kind of conservative champion of free speech, of these kind of culture war issues that Ron DeSantis wants to make central to his campaign.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've been talking about how this is high risk, high reward for DeSantis. It's sort of the same for Elon Musk as well, right? And look, we talked about how we should expect the unexpected here, and we certainly are seeing that play out in real time. Look, one of the reasons sources close to the campaign told me that they were looking at Twitter as a launching pad is because the campaign has watched as this platform has become more and more friendly to conservative firebrands under Musk's leadership. They watched as Tucker Carlson said, hey, no more Fox. All right, I'm moving to Twitter. The whole tone of the website has changed. That has been beneficial in some ways and detrimental in other ways here. And so it's interesting to see Musk with this DeSantis announcement, perhaps, really leaning into that political, that rightward shift. And the two of them aligning here, there are a lot of ideological ties. They've both railed against so-called wokeism, branded themselves as champions of free speech. And so it made sense in a lot of ways, especially for one aspect of the messaging that we're going to see a lot, according to the sources I've been speaking to on the campaign trail, which is this contrast of past versus future. And for the campaign, it seemed like Elon Musk, Twitter, social media, this sort of forward-looking platform and individual to help really brand DeSantis as also the sort of future-looking candidate and brand Trump as the past without invoking his name, as DeSantis has been doing, taking those jabs without actually going directly after the former president.
Vaughn, I'll let you jump in here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this was a relationship back last summer when Elon Musk on Twitter, he put out there that for the first time in his life, he voted for a Republican. When Mayra Flores, a young congresswoman, won her special election down in Texas. And that spawned a question from a Twitter user asking who he wanted in 2024. Elon Musk responded that it was DeSantis as of right now. And then he went on to suggest that it's time for Donald Trump, who would be 82 at the time of his inauguration, to ride into the sunset, which in natural form prompted the former president to go off on his rival social media company's account. We should note, of course, he has not been tweeting, even though he was reinstated, because he launched his own social media company, Truth Social. And he went off and showed photos of Elon Musk standing next to him there in the Oval Office, saying that Elon Musk came and he would be down on his knees begging him for subsidies along the way when he was in the White House. But now it's suddenly not conducive to his politics at the moment there, Hallie.
So let me just bring people up to speed on what's happening in case you are curious, and I have a feeling that you may be. Silence on the Twitter Spaces. There was like some hold-tight music, kind of. Now there's nothing. That's after Elon Musk talked about how the servers seem to have been overheating, et cetera. You're looking at it now. There's obviously a bunch of people in that room. There's something like roughly 500,000 listeners in there, including Matt Gaetz, Lou Dobbs, Rudy Giuliani, conservative, of course, people, players in that space. But despite this Twitter Spaces issue, and I think at this point probably fair to call it an issue, Ron DeSantis has formally launched his campaign. Here's the moment as he laid it out in his launch video that he's just posted online. Listen.
Our border is a disaster. Crime infests our cities. The federal government makes it harder for families to make ends meet, and the president flounders. But decline is a choice. Success is attainable, and freedom is worth fighting for.
Chuck Todd, your thoughts?
You know, we're going to find out. I just look at him. I don't. It didn't blow me away, but I think this entire sort of lead up has been. It has felt very reactive. It has felt very consultant-driven. It has felt very donor-driven. It has felt very pieced together with a lot of sort of disparate ideas, clear theories of the case. I think what you still don't know, and I think his greatest challenge, Ron DeSantis became a relevant political figure because he drafted off of Donald Trump, right? He ran as mini Trump in 2018. It's always kind of been his calling card. He's Trump without the drama, right? All of those things. And now they're trying to create a campaign to sort of match that image. We'll see. I think it's a tough sell, and I think that you're running up against somebody who's not going to give him any breathing room. He is not going to get a week or a window, and that's the thing that I'm curious about is what does Ron DeSantis look like in 2 weeks after Trump's been just, doing what they do over there.
Steve, let me give the final word to you because I have a feeling we're going to lose you to some reporting on what has happened here with this big moment for Twitter Spaces, this big spotlight, and some questions about how this platform is performing.
Yeah, just a disaster, it looks like. But I'll just go back to my earlier point about how this GOP primary is going to be Truth Social versus Twitter. We have Donald Trump on Truth, live truthing. I guess that's the right word. This announcement. I'll just say what he said. His collar is too big. That was his reaction. So not a lot of meat or substance there, but that's Donald Trump's take so far. And again, playing out on Truth, a much smaller network. I guarantee 450,000 people did not see that Truth tweet or whatever you call it.
Steve, Chuck, Dasha, Vaughn, thank you so much.
Thanks,
I know, Dasha, you're going to be sticking around in case there's any other updates in the next, let's say, 40 minutes or so from that Spaces. And if you want more of this, of course, Chuck is going to be on Meet the Press now tomorrow, as always, talking all things tech, talking with Microsoft Vice Chair and President Brad Smith on the future of AI tomorrow, 4 o'clock Eastern on NBC News Now, right here. To some other news to get to this evening, because tonight it is impossible to forget the horror 1 year ago today in Uvalde, when 19 little kids, 4th graders, were massacred, along with 2 of their teachers. And it is inexplicable to so many that a year later, those families still do not have answers. They still do not have accountability for why it took police so long to take that shooter down. That pain, raw and fresh again today on this day of remembrance for the kids at Robb Elementary. You see the memorials set up there to honor the faces you're about to see, the students and teachers murdered in one of the deadliest school shootings in American history. And for the people who love them, a nightmare still.
I put her in that classroom. I left her there that day. I didn't move out of Uvalde as fast as we should have. We were looking to do that. It all comes back to me. To know that my child was scared and alone in her last moments, terrified, there's There's no reason for that. I'll never be able to wrap my head around that.
Some families have questions even now about why it took police more than an hour to get inside that classroom and kill the shooter. Of course, something that was followed by conflicting accounts about what really went down. Mike Memoli is joining us now, of course, after President Biden spoke about this moment 1 year later in that role that he has taken on before in his administration, Mem, and that is consoler-in-chief, talking about these families' pain, relating it to his own loss as a father, with a community that is really, at this point, frustrated and demanding accountability.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. And we talk about Biden playing that role of consoler-in-chief, usually in the context of the immediate aftermath of a tragedy like this, what he's able to bring to the table from that deep well of empathy, of experience in a category that you don't want a lot of experiences in having this kind of searing and sudden loss in your own life. But I think what also we saw on display today was somebody who understands the significance of anniversaries just as much as the immediate aftermath. President Biden saying today that this is important to remember. Remembering is important, but it's also painful. And this comes just as he's about to mark one of his own tragic anniversaries next Tuesday, the 8th anniversary of the death of his son, Beau Biden. And so we saw the president and the first lady with those pedestals, candles for each of the victims. They paid a little bit of a moment of respect to each of them before he delivered those remarks. And I thought it was really striking, actually, that the majority of what we heard from the president today was about a call to action, about the need to do more. Let's listen to part of the president's message there.
How many more parents will live their worst nightmare before we stand up to the gun lobby? We've lost children. We have to do this to save our children.
What really struck me, Hallie, is we know how hard it is to get any legislation on a federal level as it relates to gun safety measures, and how significant many advocates feel what the president and what Democrats, working with some Republicans, were able to do last year with their measure on red flag laws and the like, the Safer Communities Act. Well, the president even downplaying that accomplishment today to say we've done something but not enough, and calling, as he has repeatedly, for renewing an assault weapons ban, for potentially taking away that liability shield for gun manufacturers. It's striking on an anniversary to have what seems like you could call a political moment, but it's something that the gun safety community thinks is important, that, as they often say, thoughts and prayers aren't enough. And to use today to actually spend a majority of his remarks making that case for policy changes still, I thought was also really notable. Hallie.
Mike Memoli, live for us there outside the White House on a day when so many people around the country are pausing, stopping, remembering those lives lost. Thank you. Also at the White House, we've got some breaking news just into us here, with a White House official telling our team the president plans to nominate General C.Q. Brown as the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They're going to announce it formally at the Rose Garden tomorrow afternoon. He's replacing current Chair Mark Milley, who says he'll step down later this year. Brown is currently the Air Force Chief of Staff. His appointment is historic. It is the first time that we will see both the Black Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Joint Chief, soon to be General Brown, ever in this country. Also in Washington, in just the last couple of minutes, you have one of the leaders of the House Republicans, Steve Scalise, telling his members they are going to get to go home for Memorial Day weekend. Why does that matter? If you're like, who cares? I get to do vacation for this weekend, too. It matters because it is a signal, a big signal, that they're not close to a deal to make sure that the country pays its bills on time. If they were, people would have to stay in town to take a vote. Now, they have to stay close. They got to be able to get back within 24 hours. But it is a sign of where things stand as that so-called X date, that deadline, gets closer and closer before the U.S. could potentially default on what it owes. That would be a global economic meltdown if it were to happen. That is roughly 8 days away, as early as June 1st. As Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, has said. We've also heard from House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in just the last hour. He's I hate to even use the word optimistic. He said things are moving in the right direction. Listen for yourselves.
I think we've made some progress working down there. So that's very positive in the aspects, and we'll continue to work through to try to get a solution.
Mentioned the Treasury Secretary speaking as well. I want to get now to the reason why people are affected by this, right? Like actual human beings. It's because the U.S., for example, owes money to pay off, for example, veterans' benefits, et cetera. Tangible things you can see: $47 billion for Medicare, $12 billion for military and civil retirement, $12 billion for those vets' benefits. And those vets are starting to get a little bit concerned about where things stand. Let me bring in Shaq Brewster, who's live for us in Iowa. Shaq?
Hi there, Hallie. Yeah, you described it very well. There's fear that I'm hearing from veterans, concern and, frankly, anger that they're even in the middle of this fight, that their livelihoods depend on whether or not there's an agreement between the president and the House Speaker. That point that you made, that on June 1st, there is a bill that the federal government has to pay, about $12 billion to veteran benefits, on the same day that the Treasury Secretary is saying she doesn't know if the government will have enough money to pay those obligations. That is causing that fear and concern among veterans. They're seeing the debate, they're frustrated by it, but for many of them, this is about how they're going to feed their family, how they're going to put food on the table. I want you to listen to some of the conversations I had with veterans here in the Davenport area about why they're watching this debate in Washington so closely.
I do get a retirement check. I do get VA disability. So when you hear there's the possibility it could go away, it makes you wonder.
For me, it would I would stop getting any type of payment, so that would definitely put us in a financial hardship.
Hallie, I think the important thing to underscore here is that it is possible that these payments get delayed. We don't know what the Treasury Department will be able to fund immediately or what they will say they'll have to fund at a later period of time, but it's that uncertainty that is causing so many issues among those in the veteran community.
Shaq Brewster, live for us there in Iowa, talking with those vets on what this really means for folks around the country. Appreciate it. Coming up here on the show, can a vitamin help you remember things better? A new study says maybe. Plus, Taylor Swift announcing a new deluxe edition of her Midnights album, who she says she'll bring on as a special guest. Coming up in the 5 Things. Alec Murdaugh, you know his name. He's convicted of murdering his wife and son in that so-called trial of the century in South Carolina. Well, he is facing new charges now tonight after being indicted by a federal grand jury. So what's the issue now? It's financial fraud, allegedly. He's looking at 22 charges, including money laundering. One alleged scheme says Murdaugh's accused of keeping for himself $3.5 million from a settlement with the estate of his housekeeper, who died after what's been described as a fall at the Murdaugh home. In another alleged plot that apparently lasted more than 15 years, Murdaugh is accused of routing and redirecting other clients' settlement funds to himself. His lawyers say he's cooperating with this investigation. They think this is going to get resolved pretty quickly without a trial. Remember, Murdaugh has already been sentenced to life in prison for his family's double murder. He is appealing that conviction. I want to bring in Danny Savalos, who's joining us for now. Obviously, being convicted of murder is the most serious thing that Alec Murdaugh faces here, right? He is convicted. As we said, he is appealing. But now he has a whole new set of issues as it relates to these alleged financial crimes that he's been charged with. Talk us through it.
Yeah, and with these crimes in federal court, with these dollar amounts and his prior conviction, his prior record, he might be looking at as much time, almost as much time as the equivalent of a life sentence that he's already serving in state court. And the way it works is, in theory, he serves out his state court sentence at a state facility, and then he marches on over, is bussed over to the federal facility to serve there if he's convicted. But, I mean, so far, much of the things that he's charged with in this federal indictment, you could say he already admitted to under oath in testimony at his state court case. And even if he hadn't taken the stand, the state introduced plenty of evidence of his financial crimes in his state court murder case. So a lot of this has been handed on a silver platter to these federal prosecutors.
Where does this go next? In other words, what are the next steps here for Alec Murdaugh as he's looking ahead to these issues? There's a deposition coming up in a separate sort of civil lawsuit here related to a boat crash in 2019. There's a series of things that will happen down the road.
It's interesting. The deposition is proceeding. Normally, civil proceedings are stayed until after the criminal proceedings are over. But in this case, the thinking is probably that he's got so many criminal woes that it's better to move forward with the civil case. So in hopes that there may be still some assets left to claim against after all this smoke clears.
Danny Savalos, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the January 6th rioter photographed with his feet up on the desk of the House Speaker. This guy here, Nancy Pelosi at the time of January 6th. He's just been sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. This is that sort of infamous photograph now. Federal prosecutors had asked the judge for more than 7 years for what he did before, during, and after the riot at the Capitol. His lawyers argued he was there to protest peacefully and was, in their words, unfortunately caught up in the whole thing. Number 2, rapper Fetty Wap was sentenced to 6 years behind bars today for his role in a drug trafficking scheme. His real name is Willie Maxwell. He pleaded guilty last summer to conspiracy to smuggle a lot of heroin, fentanyl, crack cocaine. His lawyers suggested he turned to selling drugs because of how tough things got financially during the pandemic. Number 3, taking a vitamin every day could help your memory and keep your brain from some cognitive decline, according to a new study from Harvard and Columbia. The research, which was partly paid for by Pfizer, found that people over the age of 60 who took a multivitamin every day for 3 years scored higher on a brain test than people who took a placebo. Still not clear which specific nutrients might have been the most helpful. Number 4, raw cookie dough is to blame for a bunch of salmonella outbreaks across the country, according to the CDC. The agency says people in at least 6 states got sick after eating Papa Murphy's take-and-bake cookie dough. At least 2 people ended up in the hospital, although the CDC says there may be more infections out there. No deaths have been reported. The company says they've temporarily stopped selling this stuff. Number 5, Taylor Swift just announcing she will put out a deluxe version of Midnights. That's her mega hit album. And she's got some surprise guests. New vocals from Lana Del Rey and Ice Spice. It's going to be called Midnights Till Dawn. She announced this collaboration on Twitter, calling Ice Spice the one to watch. She's real up and coming. When we come back here on the show, Target pulling a bunch of Pride merchandise off their shelves after some right-wing backlash. But they're not the only company dealing with this kind of thing. We'll get into it after the break. So Ron DeSantis is back up on Twitter Spaces. Let me take that back, because you're not looking at Ron DeSantis. You're looking at Target and some of the product backlash that Target has been getting nearly ages after, as they're heading into Pride Month here. They've had some issues pulling some of its merchandise after celebrating Pride Month. They got some backlash from customers. That's been a safety problem for workers. The company said in a statement, since introducing this year's collection, we've experienced threats. They say their workers feel less safe, less okay while they're at work. Target said it's pulling away some of the merch that's at the center of the most significant confrontational behavior. That's their words, confrontational behavior. They're not saying exactly which products they're pulling off the shelves are moving in the display space. The line, which came out early this month, features items like a Live, Laugh, Lesbian shirt and a mug saying gender fluid. We're seeing this move as the fight or the divide is escalating in this country over the rights of members of the LGBTQ+ community. Let's bring in Miguel Almaguer. What is so interesting about this story, Miguel, is that this is yet another instance, we're going to talk about Bud Light in a minute, where Target, this company, is navigating how to celebrate Pride. We saw it here in LA with the Dodgers, right? They had something similar, too.
That's exactly right.
In Target's instance, they put out this Pride merch, basically the shirts, the mugs, whatever, got a bunch of backlash, right? In some instances now, they're actually moving it back in the back of stores, pulling it off of shelves. What's happening?
So Target did get backlash. There was a products, they rolled out about 2,000 products for Pride Month, which they have done for the last 10 years.
That's not new.
No, that's new. They've been doing that for 10 years. And so it's something they've established a long time ago. And there was backlash over these products and the placements in the store. And then we saw these viral videos of people coming into the stores, kicking over the product stands, tossing the merchandise on the ground. And Target basically said our employees are threatened by this behavior and we need to either pull this merchandise or move it to another part of the store. Citing that concern, Target also said we're going to roll back in the areas where some of this merchandise is placed. Now, we also spoke to some customers. They had mixed reviews. It doesn't really matter from what we heard what your stance is on the merchandise. People, for the most part, said that employees need to be protected. Here's what they said.
Everyone has their own way of thinking now, so they should respect and whoever believes in what they are, and then just let them be.
I think they should do what's best for the employees since they're there and they're the ones actually getting harassed, and the LGBTQ community should be open to that and respect it.
So you have people who shop at Target regularly who are concerned about employees who they see every day, but you also have folks who are really angry about some of the products that they're seeing. But as you mentioned, these products have been in the store for about a decade.
This has taken off online in a lot of ways, but as we all know, Miguel, not everything you see online is true, right? So there was rumors, I understand that, like, for example, they were selling quote-unquote tuck-friendly bathing suits for kids. That is not actually true. I mean, there was misinformation around some of this.
Complete misinformation, which kind of fueled some of the controversy here. Target has over 2,000 products. They wouldn't say what items they pulled, but that tuck-friendly swimsuit was one of the issues that seemed to be generating a lot of buzz online. There was misinformation that said these tuck-friendly swimsuits were being marketed and sold to children. Completely
that
false.
Was not true. And tuck-friendly indicating for people to wear when they're doing drag, for example, et cetera.
Correct.
Or just people who are trans
or transitioning. Right. And it's this attire that they can wear while swimming. And it simply wasn't true. It wasn't the case. It didn't matter. It fueled all of this controversy online, which drove people into the stores who were upset, who were angry, who kind of, did this demonstration inside the store, kicking over signs in the stands.
Is there concern on the part of Target? Can we infer this from the statements about how this might affect their business, like the bottom line?
Well, Target didn't say they were going to pull all of the products, and they simply said they're part of a company that's inclusive and they want diversity. Yeah. So they seem to be kind of walking and straddling that line.
Miguel Almaguer, thank you for being on top of this story for us. Good to be with you as well. So you heard us talking about not just Target, but Bud Light there. 2 months after that partnership with trans influencer Dylan Mulvaney, Bud Light is struggling with sales, according to some new numbers out today. We're talking about data from Beer Business Daily, which says Bud Light sales in May dropped something like 30%. That's been a trend that's been happening since some of the backlash to this Mulvaney partnership. That was, remember, at March Madness. It was like a thing that Bud Light did, partnering with not just Mulvaney, but a number of people to promote the beer. Obviously, Mulvaney shared this sponsored post on Instagram, 1.2 million followers. And then the backlash began from members of the conservative community, their customers, look at this, dumping out their beer, pouring it out, throwing it into the trash can, running over cases of beer. The spokesperson for Anheuser-Busch InBev, Bud Light's parent company, didn't respond to a request for comment on the numbers, but I want to bring in Brian Chung, who joins us now, because the numbers are the driver of this story in many ways, right? Because initially, Bud Light kind of ignored the backlash that started to build. Then they put some of their marketing executives on leave. Then they put out this ad campaign that was super Americana vibes, right? Like very patriotic here. And yet, the bottom line has not recovered at this point.
Yeah, and by the way, that 30% figure that you referenced in terms of the sales decline, that follows a week prior that saw another 28% decline. So when we talk about what's happening with Bud Light sales, I mean, the numbers, at least coming from Beer Business Daily, which is offering these numbers, shows that there is a very tangible impact on the business. Now, when it comes to the story overall, as you mentioned, it was the conservatives that were bashing Bud Light after they had that partnership with Dylan Mulvaney. And now you have the LGBTQ plus community now boycotting Anheuser-Busch products entirely, beyond even Bud Light, because of the retraction of their association with that. We also have to remember Bud Light actually put on leave some of the executives that were responsible for that partnership. But again, now you're seeing all these other brands, Corona, Michelob Ultra, Bud Heavy, getting a lot of the boycott now, too. So when you're getting it from both sides, that's going to impact sales. Although I want to emphasize at the beginning of the month, the company did say in an earnings call that their growth outlook for earnings remained unchanged, Hallie.
What does that mean in English?
Well, what it means is that they expect sales essentially and the bottom line profits to remain the same despite all the headwinds. But this is all before the numbers that we just got from this trade publication essentially over the past few weeks. So maybe they have to change their tone on that the next time they offer an analyst update.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the timeline piece of it. What's also part of this story is the political overlay, the political context here. And we saw that even today with Nikki Haley, who talked about this. She brought up this Dylan Mulvaney controversy, Brian.
Yeah, well, when we talk...
Anybody know about Dylan Mulvaney? The Bud Light person? Make no mistake, that is a guy dressed up like a girl, mocking women. Women don't act like that.
Yeah, and when we talk about what's happening in the political sphere, this is very much part of the conversation, arguably why it's getting as much attention as it is right now. But we have to remember, this is something we should expect to see other candidates like Ron DeSantis, who's attempting to announce his candidacy right now, maybe harp on as well, Hallie.
Brian Chang, thank you very much for that breakdown on all things sort of biz and Bud Light related. Appreciate it. Coming up here on the show, why France is now banning a bunch of domestic flights. That's later on in the Global. NBC News covers hundreds of international stories every day, and because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our foreign desk has done it for you. Here's some of what they're watching in a new segment we call The Global. Out of France, the country's banning short-haul flights to cut down on emissions. The law means you can't fly between places within France if there's a train ride less than 2.5 hours. It's going to affect trips from Paris to places like Lyon and Bordeaux. The World Wildlife Fund has called air travel the most carbon-intensive activity anybody can do. Out of Israel, researchers are saying today that sea urchins are dying at a rate that's really concerning in the Gulf of Eilat. They're not really sure why. One biologist is calling it a fast and violent death that can happen within 2 days. It's threatening the coral reefs in the Red Sea because the urchins help keep those reefs healthy. Out of the Netherlands, taking sustainability 6 feet under, an inventor is now growing mushroom-based coffins that biodegrade in 45 days. They put mycelium, the root structure of mushrooms, and hemp fiber into a mold. You're seeing some of it here. They also grow urns that can be buried with a sapling. So, to politics now. And Ron DeSantis back up on Twitter Spaces after what we thought we were going to bring you at the top of the show, which was that announcement that he is officially running for president. He did put out a launch video on Twitter. He did that audio-only conversation with Elon Musk, moderated by David Sachs. We have the moment. We want to play it. They want to tell you what his campaign's saying about the whole thing. Here it is.
Well, I am running for president of the United States to lead our great American comeback.
That's what it is. That's what it was. As for this whole thing and how it went down, because, again, not traditional. We haven't seen a candidate announce their run for the presidency on a Twitter Spaces. They say Governor DeSantis broke the internet. That should tell you everything you need to know about the strength of his candidacy. Campaigns, campaigning right there, right? Doing what they do. They actually moved from one Twitter Space to another Twitter Space, et cetera. And what was really the biggest test yet of that platform's ability and Elon Musk's ability to get people on Twitter Spaces. President Biden also had something to say about it, or at least his team did, in a tweet, sending it out. This link works, and that's a link to his fundraising site there. Dasha Burns is live for us in Miami. So here we are, 51 minutes in, Dasha, right? But it has ultimately happened, the sort of facts of the matter that we thought would happen here. Ron DeSantis is running for president. He's saying he's running for president. He's finally talking about how he's officially running for president. Took a minute to get here after some of these issues on Twitter. But talk us through what you're hearing from your sources in just the last couple of minutes here.
Well, look, Hallie, how you view those technical issues and how this launch started, how this event got started here is a bit of a Rorschach test, right? If you are on Team DeSantis, yes, it broke the internet. I just got another statement from a spokesperson on the DeSantis campaign now. Now we can officially call it a campaign, right? Saying right. It's a groundbreaking announcement, an internet-breaking announcement. On the other hand, if you're Team Trump, this was an epic failure, some sources are telling me. Another source just sent me a response with a picture of a cold glass of white wine. So depending on who you are and which side you're on, you're reacting to this in quite a different way. But it is a big deal to get this number of people on Twitter Spaces, which I think, before 24 hours ago or so when we reported about this, I don't even know that many people knew what Twitter Spaces was. So this might actually be a big win for Elon Musk if he's trying to promote this audio platform of his. And this is a conversation we were having earlier, right? Like, who was this a bigger benefit for? Who was this a bigger risk for, DeSantis or Musk? And now it is up and running. He is officially in the race. This is certainly unconventional, non-traditional, got a whole lot of attention in every possible way. And here we are. It's live. It's happening.
And like in a week, it's not going to matter. Like by the time the first debate rolls around, it's not going to matter. Nobody remember, how you now, unless it's, you know, I mean, I guess we still talk about Donald Trump coming down the golden escalator because he still talks about it. But, you know, the bottom line is he's in the race here. Talk through what's to come for him because he's going to get on the road. I spoke with somebody sort of in Republican circles in the last 24 hours who was like, hey, listen, making the point, however anybody announces, what matters is, do they get boots on the ground in Iowa and in New Hampshire and in these key early states? Can they get the campaign apparatus up and in place in order to actually get people to turn out to vote in the primary?
Yeah, and the reality is this is a first-time presidential candidate going up against a third-time presidential candidate, right, that has already built up this infrastructure twice before. So that's going to be a challenge. But they're getting that started right now, Hallie. In fact, across the street from me is the Four Seasons Hotel, where right now donors and bundlers, fundraisers are gathering to start making calls, raising money. And that big war chest that he has is going to be a major asset to build out that infrastructure. They're saying it's going to be unlike any other ground game that you've seen before. We'll see how that actually plays out. But he's going to be going to those early critical states. He will be on the ground. His team is going to be on the ground. So that's really what we're watching for next here.
And it is, you know, an opportunity for Ron DeSantis here, at least for the evening, right? That his people wanted to kind of capture some attention, as you say they did, and they did it.
It's a moment
in a pretty friendly space too. Meaning, you look at who's sort of listening in, you look at you look at who's moderating, who's talking with Elon Musk here, and it is an opportunity for him to sort of bypass the traditional media sphere, at least for the moment.
Yeah, they made a moment happen. They did it on a platform that has become increasingly friendly to conservative firebrands. I think the governor sees himself as one, and that is what he's going to be campaigning on for the next several months here. And we are going to be hearing him tout what he's touting on this platform right now is what he has done here in Florida, the issues that he has really pressed forward when you talk about education, when you talk about abortion and that 6-week ban, the way that he sort of moved to the right of Trump, the culture wars, that is going to be a major aspect of what we hear from him officially on the campaign trail now, Hallie.
Dasha Burns, thank you very much. Appreciate it. That does it for this hour and for the one before it. You can find us anytime, of course, on YouTube, Roku, Peacock. Pick your platform, just search for Hallie Jackson Now. We will see you tomorrow night back home in Washington. Top Story picks up more coverage right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.